You update your LinkedIn headline for the third time this year. Not because you changed jobs, because you are trying to make 16 or 20 years of doing one thing very precisely sound like something a stranger scrolling on a Tuesday might still need. You were told to specialize, go deep, become the person in the room who cannot be replaced because no one else knows what you know. You did that. You built the exact expertise the advice promised would protect you. Here is the contradiction. The depth that was supposed to make you secure is the same depth that now makes you difficult to move. The more precisely the market once valued you, the more precisely it can now stop needing you, and the less anything you built transfers to what comes next. I am going to show you why that is not bad luck. It is the mechanism working exactly as it was priced to. The belief is simple, and for most of your career, it has been rewarded every time you tested it. Depth beats breadth. The generalist gets replaced by whoever is willing to learn fast and work cheap. The specialist gets called by name. You watched it happen around you. The colleague who tried to do a little of everything was the first one let go when budgets tightened, because a little of everything is easy to redistribute across the people who remain. You were not first. You were the name someone typed into a search bar when the exact problem showed up, the person whose calendar got protected, whose rate held even in years when everyone else's got renegotiated down. So you kept narrowing, not recklessly, deliberately, the way you were taught to. Every certification, every conference, every year of experience pointed the same direction, deeper into the one thing you were already good at, because that is what the market appeared to be paying for. Compensation surveys backed it up. Recruiters confirmed it. The advice from people 15 years ahead of you in the same field confirmed it too. Get so good at one specific thing that the question stops being whether you'll have work and becomes only what you'll charge for it. For a long stretch, that held. It is not a story you invented to feel better. The premium was real. It showed up in your salary, in the speed at which people returned your calls, in the quiet confidence of never having to explain from scratch what you did. You built something, and building it felt correctly, like the safest financial decision available to you. Then a number crosses your feed, or gets mentioned in a meeting, or shows up in a report someone forwards without comment and it does not fit. Labor economists who study what happens after layoffs have a specific, uncomfortable finding. They track displaced workers using survey data going back decades, matching each person's occupation to how narrow or how broad its skill requirements are. The pattern holds across industries. Workers in more specialized occupations take longer to find their next job, not slightly longer, meaningfully longer. And when they finally do get reemployed, they earn a premium over their more generalist peers, the exact premium that made specializing look like the right call in the first place. Read that twice, because it is not two separate findings. It is one finding wearing two faces. The thing that pays you more is the same thing that strands you longer. Researchers who study this call it, half-jokingly, the hedgehog's curse. The hedgehog knows one big thing extremely well. It is unmatched at that one thing, and it has almost no ability to become anything else when the one thing stops being needed. You do not have language for this yet. You just have the feeling that something you were told was a single straightforward advantage might actually be two things stapled together, one of which you were never warned about. The premium was always visible. It was on your pay stub. The other side of it was not on anything you were shown, because nobody hands you the unemployment duration data when they hand you the raise. Maybe it lands as a friend's story, the one who did the exact right thing for 15 years and then went quiet on group texts for a while. Maybe it lands as a line in an article you almost skip past. Either way, the discomfort is specific. It is not the generic fear of being replaced that everyone carries now. It is narrower than that and colder. It is the possibility that the very trait you were praised for, the depth, the precision, the years spent narrowing instead of spreading out, was never simply an asset sitting on your side of the ledger. It might have always carried a cost column you were not shown, one that only becomes visible the day the demand curve moves, without asking your permission first. Here is the mechanism. Economists who track it call it occupational specificity risk. Everyone else, once they understand it, ends up calling it something closer to what it feels like. A trap that pays well right up until it closes. The origin is older than your career. Specialization as a career strategy scaled out of the same logic that built the assembly line. The idea that breaking work into narrower and narrower pieces makes each piece more productive. Through most of the 20th century, that logic applied mainly to factory labor. Starting in the 1980s and accelerating through the rise of the knowledge economy, it was repackaged as personal advice for professionals. Find your niche. Build a personal brand around one thing. Become the name people think of for one specific problem. An entire industry of career coaching, professional certification, and conference culture grew up selling exactly that promise. And for a long time, the promise was not false. It was simply incomplete. The current form of the trap is faster than the version your parents' generation faced, because the systems that define a specialization can now change structurally instead of gradually. A specific platform, a specific regulatory framework, a specific technology stack can shift underneath an entire specialization within a matter of quarters, not decades. Research from the World Economic Forum estimates that roughly 4 in 10 core workplace skills are expected to change meaningfully by 2030, and separate industry analysis puts the working half-life of a technical skill, the point at which half of what you know has become outdated, at somewhere between 2 and 5 years by the end of this decade, down from 8 to 12 years as recently as a generation ago. That is not a call to panic about any single skill. It is a description of how much faster the floor moves now than it did when the advice to specialize was first handed to you. Here is who profits, and it is not one villain. It is an arrangement. Employers profit because a hyper-specific hire arrives with zero ramp-up cost. They are not paying for potential. They are paying for a problem to disappear on day one, and they are willing to pay a premium for that speed. But the arrangement carries no obligation in the other direction. The employer bears none of the retraining risk if the underlying need shifts. That risk sits entirely with you, priced into your compensation not as a warning but as a bonus, the premium you were so pleased to have earned. The credentialing and education industry profits too, structurally, because the answer to narrowing is always sold as more narrowing, anxious about becoming outdated. The available remedy is rarely offered as breadth. It is offered as a new certification in an even more specific adjacent niche, because that is the product that industry knows how to sell, and because staying inside your lane, just further down it, is easier to package than telling you to leave the lane entirely. And the market itself profits from a mechanism that most people never name. Compensation for expertise is not actually a payment for what you know. It is a payment for what it would cost someone else to learn it fast enough to replace you. That number is not fixed. It moves every time the underlying system that makes your knowledge relevant shifts even slightly, and it can move to zero without your competence changing at all. You did not get worse at your job. The cost of replicating your job for someone else changed. That is the plant to hold on to, because it is going to matter again before this ends. The market was never pricing your mastery, it was pricing your scarcity. And scarcity is a condition of the system around you, not a property you own. There is a second-order effect most people never see coming, because it does not arrive as a layoff. It arrives as a quiet ceiling. Once an organization has invested in your narrow expertise, it has a direct incentive to keep you narrow rather than to develop you broadly, because broadening you is expensive, slow, and increases the odds you leave for a role that uses the new range elsewhere. Your employer benefits from your depth and benefits again from your immobility. Internal mobility data across large firms consistently shows narrowly specialized employees moving into adjacent roles less often than generalists, not because they lack the intelligence, but because nobody on either side of the relationship has an incentive to fund the detour. You were never being hoarded out of malice. You were being hoarded because moving you was a cost nobody wanted to carry, right up until the day the specialization itself stopped being worth the carrying. This is why the same research that documents the specialization premium also documents the specialization penalty inside the same dataset, the same people, the same career. It is not two outcomes competing. It is one price with two delivery dates. You collect the premium first while the system holds. You pay the penalty later when the system moves, and the size of the bill turns out to be roughly proportional to how deep you went. The following is a composite illustration built from aggregate labor market data and publicly documented industry patterns, not a real individual. Call him Marcus. 43 years old, married, 2 kids, ages 8 and 11, a mortgage with 26 years left on it, and a payment of $2,600 a month. 16 years ago, at 27, Marcus made a rational decision. Digital marketing was splintering to specialties, and the generalist marketers around him were getting squeezed on rate while the narrow specialists were getting called by name. He picked search, specifically organic ranking, the technical craft of understanding exactly how a search engine decided what to place first. He went deep and stayed there for 16 years, through algorithm updates, through platform changes, through 3 employers, each one paying him more precisely because his knowledge got more precisely useful. The conventional wisdom held for most of that run. By his late 30s, Marcus was director of organic growth at a mid-sized e-commerce company, base salary $195,000. The acknowledged authority in the building on why traffic moved the way it moved. He had done exactly what advice said. Depth had paid on schedule year after year. Then the contradicting reality arrived, and it did not arrive as a personal failure. It arrived as a platform shift. Over 14 months, as AI-generated summaries began answering search queries directly instead of sending users to click through to a result, the click-through rate on the exact kind of ranking Marcus had spent 16 years mastering fell by roughly half. In line with the wider industry, data researchers were documenting across hundreds of thousands of tracked keywords during the same period. His company's organic sessions dropped 41% in that window. Marcus had not gotten worse at his job. The mechanism his entire specialization depended on, a click following a ranking, had structurally changed underneath him. The moment of understanding did not come from a performance review. It came from a hiring freeze that folded his role into a broader growth function, and from watching a former teammate, a generalist marketing manager with half his tenure and none of his technical depth, get 3 interview requests within 3 weeks of the same reorg, while Marcus's own outreach, built entirely around 16 years of one exact craft, generated silence. The market was not asking for his depth anymore. It was asking for range he had spent 16 years deliberately not building, because building it would have diluted the very specialization that used to be the safest bet available to him. Marcus was not fired. That is the part that resists a clean ending. He still holds the title, still earns close to his old salary, still gets asked quietly to explain how the old system used to work, the way a company keeps someone around who understands the legacy machine nobody wants to fully retire yet. What changed is the number that used to make him feel secure. 16 years of depth now reads, to recruiters outside his company, as 16 years of narrowing, expensive to hire, expensive to retrain, harder to place than someone with 8 years and 3 different disciplines on their resume. His emotional state has a name for it internally: expensive obsolescence, the particular unease of still being paid well for a skill whose expiration date arrived quietly, sometime in the last 2 years, without anyone sending a notice. The financial calculus is the part he has not said out loud to his wife yet. His fixed costs were sized to a salary trajectory that assumed the old premium would keep compounding the way it had for 16 years, not flatten the way it just did. The mortgage payment does not know his specialization lost value. Neither does the timeline for 2 college funds, both underfunded relative to where the plan assumed they would be by now. If the role folds further and he has to search externally, the labor research on displaced specialized workers suggests his most likely outcome is not zero income. It is a longer search than a generalist would face, followed by reemployment at a materially lower rate than the one he is earning today. The exact pattern the unemployment duration data predicts for occupations built on narrow, non-transferable expertise. Marcus is not currently unemployed. He is, by every internal metric, still successful. What has changed is quieter than a layoff. The margin for error he thought 16 years of depth had purchased him turned out to be smaller than the number on his pay stub implied. Marcus's version of this runs on search algorithms. The same mechanism runs on different rails across nearly every high-income specialization, and it is worth widening the frame hypothetically to see the shape of it clearly. Picture a patent attorney who spent a decade becoming the go-to name for intellectual property in one narrow category of semiconductor design, only to watch a regulatory shift or a manufacturing pivot shrink that category's filing volume by half within a single fiscal year. Picture a financial analyst who built an entire career around one specific valuation methodology, precisely as that methodology fell out of favor with the institutional clients who used to pay for it. Picture a customer support specialist who spent years becoming the internal expert on one piece of enterprise software, whose accumulated troubleshooting knowledge was then used, without much irony, to train the AI system that now answers those exact questions instead of routing them to a person. In each hypothetical case, the mechanism is identical to the one that reached Marcus. Depth was rewarded until the system depth depended on moved, and the same precision that once commanded a premium became the reason reentry took longer and cost more. The scale of this is not a handful of unlucky professions. Industry research projecting workforce change through the end of the decade estimates that a substantial share of the global workforce, on the order of 6 in 10 workers most count, will need meaningful reskilling as core skill requirements shift, and the projected pace of that shift keeps compressing. What used to be a once in a career adjustment is trending toward something closer to a standing condition of employment. Picture 2, a radiologist who subspecialized narrowly in reading one category of routine imaging, the exact category where automated screening tools have advanced fastest, watching referral volume for that specific read quietly redirect toward a machine that does the first pass now. Or a corporate tax specialist whose entire practice was built on structuring around one jurisdiction's rules, precisely as an international minimum tax agreement neutralized the advantage that structure used to sell. None of these hypothetical people did anything wrong. Each one followed the same advice Marcus followed, delivered by the same career logic, and each one is exposed to the same asymmetry: a premium collected up front, a bill that arrives later and lands hardest on whoever went deepest. None of this means specialization was a mistake. The premium was, and often still is, real and collectible. What it means is that the premium was never a stable state. It was a temporary price the market was willing to pay for narrowness, denominated in a currency, relevance, that the specialist does not control and the system does not guarantee. Multiply Marcus by every profession running this same trade, and you are not looking at individual misfortune. You are looking at a structural feature of how expertise gets priced in a system that changes faster than any single career can re-narrow to match it. You came into this thinking the word was a compliment. Irreplaceable. It sounds like the finish line, the thing you were building toward the entire time you were narrowing. Sit with what the word actually describes. Irreplaceable does not mean impossible to lose. It means impossible to move. Those are not synonyms. One is a form of safety. The other is a form of containment, and for 16 years the two can look identical from the inside. Remember the plant from earlier. The market does not pay you for what you know. It pays you for what it would cost someone else to learn it fast enough to replace you. That number was never a property of your competence. It was a property of the system's current shape, and systems reshape on their own schedule, not yours. The premium you earned was not proof that your knowledge was permanently scarce. It was a receipt for scarcity that existed at the time, nothing more, nothing guaranteed forward. This is what the hedgehog's curse actually redefines, once you stop hearing it as bad news and start hearing it as a design fact. Depth and mobility are not the same axis. and no amount of depth converts into mobility on its own. A specialist who never invests anything in transferability is not choosing safety over risk. They are choosing a different risk, a slower one, priced to look like safety for exactly as long as the underlying system holds still. What Marcus lost was not his competence. It was the assumption that competence and mobility were the same purchase. The reframe is not that specialization is wrong. It is that expertise was never the asset. Expertise plus the ability to relocate it is the asset, and only one of those two components was ever being paid for at a premium. The other component, the part that determines what happens the day the system moves, was never for sale. It had to be built separately, on purpose, the entire time you were narrowing, and almost no one tells you that while they are selling you the narrowing. There is a colder way to say all of this, and it is worth sitting inside for a moment rather than rushing past. The advice to specialize was never dishonest. It was incomplete in a way that happened to benefit the people distributing it. Employers benefit from your immobility. The credentialing industry benefits from your continued narrowing. Neither one had a reason to mention the other half of the finding, the half about how long the search takes and how much of the premium gets given back once the system moves. You were not lied to. You were simply given one half of an equation and told it was the whole thing, and you built 16 years of career strategy on the half you were shown. You built the depth exactly as instructed, year after year. Nobody told you, at the time, that depth alone was never going to be the same thing as freedom. If you cannot walk away, you are not free. Before you go, sit with one question quietly, not for the comments unless you want to put it there. If the thing you are best at disappeared tomorrow, what about you professionally would still be true? Specialization premium comes with a specialization trap. The market that values you most is also the one that owns you most completely.